Good morning and God bless you on this Tuesday morning. As we continue our series of Can You Relate, yesterday we were introduced to King Ahab, one of the worst kings of Israel, and a truly wicked man for a lot of ways. Wicked in the things that he did, but also wicked in his weakness and his cowardice. And today we're going to introduce you and ask you, can you relate to Elijah the prophet? And the prophet Elijah was the one who more than any other stood up and opposed Ahab publicly. And not only warned him, not only tried to reason with him and call him away from his folly, but finally had to announce to him God's verdict and that God's judgment was coming. And of course, when you hear that, you know that's not good news. And so Ahab hated Elijah. In fact, when you get to 1 Kings chapter 18, the chapter starts with word going out that Ahab has sent out messengers to every city in the region, trying to find any clue where Elijah might be holding out, because he wanted to kill him. And so Ahab has sent out these messengers, and he has a servant named Obadiah. And Obadiah is one who serves the Lord and is still faithful to the God of Israel. And so Obadiah comes across Elijah, and Elijah tells him, "Go and tell Ahab to come and meet me." And Obadiah is terrified. He thinks that if he does that, if he sends that message to Ahab, Ahab will come, and then Elijah will have run away, and then Obadiah is going to be on the hook. Obadiah actually protests, "He's going to kill me." And Elijah assures him, "You tell Ahab to meet me here, and I will be here." So it starts, and I'm going to read to you from 1 Kings chapter 18, starting in verse 16. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and followed the Baals. Now summon the people all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." And that kind of sets the stage for what happens next. And you probably remember the story. Elijah tells them to set up 2 altars and pile them up with wood, and to sacrifice a bull and place it on each altar. One was an altar dedicated to the God of Israel, the one true God, and the other was the altar dedicated to the Baals and to the Asherahs and the 850 prophets that served them. And so he let them go first. He said, "Okay, if your gods, if the idols you serve really have power, call to them and have them send fire down from heaven to consume your offering." And they couldn't do it. In fact, all day they scream, they cry out, they pray, they sing, and eventually by the end of the day they're slashing themselves with flints. And Elijah begins to mock them. Yell louder, maybe he's asleep, or maybe you need to yell louder because he's in a faraway place. He's mocking them because he knows that their idols are nothing, that Elijah's the one that represents the living God of heaven. And finally, when it's his turn, Elijah tells him, "Make a moat around my offering, fill it with water, pour water over the food, pour water over the bowl, soak everything, saturate it so that nobody can think that this is a trick." And then Elijah prays to the Lord, the God of Israel, the one true God, and fire comes down from heaven and consumes the offering. And suddenly, in front of all the people of Israel, Elijah says, "Now you know who the real God is. Put these false prophets to death." and the people turn on the prophets of Baal and Asherah and slay them. And Ahab is so humiliated, he flees, perhaps in fear of his own life, but he's certainly humbled, certainly shamed. Well, I shouldn't say humble. There's nothing humble about Ahab's heart, but he's been perhaps humiliated in public. This is Elijah's finest moment. His courage to stand fearlessly against Ahab, fearlessly against those who proclaimed these idols and these powers that really are no powers. I'm going to ask you today, as you think about it, in what areas of your life today do you need courage? Because at the heart of this message, at the heart of this passage, when you look at Elijah, there is courage that is born of faith and confidence in God. And I know at times in my life, and maybe at times in your life, those are things that we may wish we had, but we don't know necessarily how to access. So is there an area in your life where you need courage that is born of faith and confidence in God? Not necessarily in your own strength or your own brains and your own brawn to be able to figure things out or overcome, but confidence in the God who made you and gave you your life, the God who loved you and sent his Son to save you. You know, when I think of this, I think of the words that the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy. And again, Paul loved Timothy. Timothy was like a son to him. And Paul wrote to encourage Timothy, to challenge him and motivate him, not because he was disappointed in any way, but I think Paul knew better than anyone how tough it can be to serve the Lord, especially when you have to suffer for doing what's right. And so he writes these words in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. And I want you to think about that. You know, the same Holy Spirit that empowered Elijah and gave him the courage and confidence to stand against King Ahab and all those 850 prophets of Baals and Asherah, that same Holy Spirit is available to us today. And when we call on him and we say, Lord, fill me with your courage, fill me with faith, with the confidence that comes from you, so that I can do your will and stand. Again, I ask you that question, what is it, in what area of life or what situation are you facing where you need that courage and that confidence? And then I think about what it says that we receive from the Holy Spirit. He gives us power. He gives us love. He gives us self-discipline. You know, boy, if we're going to take a stand, it's not a stand of arrogance and it's not a stand that divides people, but it's a stand of love, standing for the truth of Jesus and the love that he has for all people. Standing with the power to know that we are not alone, but the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is with us. And that same Spirit has the ability to work in us and give us the spirit of self-discipline that changes us from the inside out. So as you think about that place in your life where you may need to receive courage and power and love and self-discipline from God, and as you think about the faith and courage of Elijah today, pray and ask God to renew your heart and fill you with what only he can give so that you can stand.